Welcome back, Raiders. Making a short video to review some of what we talked about in class today, and that's historical thinking about Earth's history. There are various views that have been held. Some of those were referred to in the core geology film that we watched, but we talked about others, and I want to just summarize through this video some of the thinking, the way that people have through history viewed the Earth. The first of those views is what we call stasis. And probably in science fiction, we've come across that when we think of stasis pods or stasis chambers, something that keeps somebody alive in a particular state, something like that. But the big idea of stasis, if people are viewing the Earth and Earth's processes, Earth's systems, with the view of stasis, is it's just an idea. The idea that Earth stays the same. Really, the idea is that the Earth is essentially unchanging. And even our language, I'm going to put this in quotation marks just to remind us, if you have a hard time remembering what stasis is, stays. It stays the same. Stasis, it's staying the same. And really, the idea again is that the Earth is essentially unchanging. And sometimes when we talk about the Earth, like we're looking at a mountain, and we might say it's been there since the beginning of time, just like that. Well, it may seem that way. It may seem unchanging, but we know that actually little processes are always acting upon that, sometimes violent processes. It could be an earthquake. It could be a mountain that then later erupts, a volcanic mountain. But they're slow processes too. There are things like weathering and erosion that are affecting that. And if you go around mountains very often, you'll actually see material that has been transported down the mountain over time and then is carried off, let's say through streams or rivers or whatever. But one thing that we need to realize is that stasis was actually kind of set aside long time ago. There was an ancient thinker, philosopher, scientist by the name of Heraclitus. I'm going to go ahead and write his name here, Heraclitus, who once said, you can't cross the same river twice. Now, we know that we could get on a bridge and cross the Tennessee River time and time again. But the key word in this statement from Heraclitus is the same. Is it exactly the same river? Yes, it's still the Tennessee River, but the water that's flowing, the sediments that are being transported, the sediment load of the river, it's actually different sediment. It's different water. And actually the shape, if you could look at the minute particles on the floor and the sides of the river, you'd see it's actually being sculpted, it's being changed regularly. So even way back in ancient times, Heraclitus realized that things don't stay the same, that the Earth is not unchanging. The second view that we're dealing with now is catastrophism. And when we see this word, we can see that the root catastrophe is in here. And catastrophism is basically the idea that sudden violent event or events have shaped Earth. It's probably not a completely alien idea, The idea that a sudden violent event or events, I can put an A over here, a sudden violent event or events have shaped Earth. Now we know, I think, that catastrophic things happen. Think of the eruption at Pompeii and the way that it destroyed that city and most of the people and animals there. We know of major earthquakes that can have a devastating effect. But really, we're talking about processes that are shaping Earth in an obvious way. So the people who are adherents or devoted to the idea of catastrophism really put a lot of emphasis on a particular event or events. And an example that we could have of this, and I'll just put example over here, in sacred books such as the Bible or the Quran, we have stories, narratives about major floods that were responsible for killing off humans and animals and shaping the earth. And so both of these sources are actually talking about what fancy term is the Noahic flood, the flood that Noah, again, according to the Bible, the Quran, or things like that, they would refer to that and say this played a major role in shaping the earth. And there are actually a lot of people who kind of put all of their emphasis on Earth's history kind of into that basket. They put all of their eggs in that basket. Well, the problem with holding on to just this view is we realize that there are a lot of slow, gradual processes. Think about a stream. On a clear day, clear sunny day, think about that same stream or river after a heavy rain. And we see that the water is no longer clear. We actually see a higher water level. But apart from the higher water level, on the clear sunny day, the water is clear. After the rain, we see that the water is murky because it's carrying sediment. When water runs off of the land surface and goes down into that stream, it's picking up clay and sand, silt, various sizes of particles. Or as that heavier water flow goes through the stream or the river, it's picking up material from the bed of the stream or river, and it's carrying that. It's called its sediment load, that river or stream's sediment load. So we realize that there must be gradual processes also. So the third view, and this is really, really popular amongst earth scientists, kind of a big word, but you can see that a root here, uniform, really the idea of uniformity. And the big idea that you'll hear repeated a lot when people are talking about this is simply that the present is the key to the past. The big idea behind this is that we can look at present day processes and assume that the same processes were operating in the past, and not only operating in the past, but perhaps operating at the same rate. So we could look at the processes, look at their rates today, how much sediment is being moved and how rapidly is that being moved? What's the rate at which it's being moved? Uniformitarianism really looks at the present and it says we can assume that everything in the past happened that same way. Now, if you have a handout, you'll see that there's an emphasis in uniformitarianism, an emphasis on gradualism, things happening gradually, an emphasis on gradualism, and fancy word here, incrementalism. Increments are little bits, little parts of something. So on a meter stick, a millimeter is an increment. It's a small increment. So the idea of incrementalism is little by little or bit by bit. So the big idea here is that the idea that slow, steady processes really are responsible for what's happening on Earth. So the idea that slow, steady processes operate, and I can add here little by little, to shape Earth. So people who are adherents of, who support the idea of uniformitarianism, there's the strong emphasis on gradualism, incrementalism, little by little, bit by bit. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, except that we realize that there are processes that are slow, that are incremental, that are little by little, bit by bit, but we realize that there are some quite catastrophic events that have occurred in history and are occurring today. And I could give you stories from scientific meetings that I've been to where these types of ideas have been debated and brought up. So uniformitarianism is a viewpoint that has been held for a long time by a lot of Earth scientists. But other Earth scientists have actually discarded this idea in favor of another. And that's what we call actualism. And again, you can see the root of this word. The word actual is here. And in actualism, there's the idea that all actual processes or events, slow and steady, as well as sudden and violent, shape Earth. The idea that all actual processes, things that really happen, that's what we mean by actual, things that really happen, have happened, are happening, could happen in the future, that all actual events contribute to the shaping of Earth. This is actually a really, really helpful idea. This is what we could say is a middle position between catastrophism and uniformitarianism. So I'll put here in parentheses, middle position, or what in Latin is called a via media, a middle way. And there's a lot to be said for this. In fact, you can see on the handout that we had in class, it says actualism is valuable as a theory or as an approach to understanding Earth's history because of its explanatory power. Thus, many geologists today uphold this as a methodological principle because you can have rapid, sudden, violent events, but you can also have gradual, incremental events that are involved in shaping our planet. Now, up where it says actualism on your handout, you can see that it also says in parentheses, realizing that some embrace philosophical naturalism while others reject it. So what is philosophical naturalism? Let me just erase the top here, and I will write philosophical naturalism and the big idea behind philosophical naturalism is it's an idea that says there are no non-natural processes or events. There are no non-natural processes or events. Now, I don't want to be confusing here. When we say non-natural, we're saying, essentially, we're saying supernatural, that there are no supernatural events. Well, depending upon, remember when we talked about the three realms of knowing at the beginning of the year, we said that there is a metaphysical realm. In fact, the metaphysical realm helps us to answer ultimate questions, the types of questions we deal with every day about right and wrong, good and bad, true and false, all of those sorts of things. Now, these realms intersect. The scientific realm, the documentary realm, the metaphysical realm, these intersect, and they're involved with one another. But if you hold to this position called philosophical naturalism, you're basically saying that you reject the idea that there could be anything that is supernatural. And essentially, in this case, you're saying that there are no miracles. Now, your metaphysical positions, your worldview assumptions, your beliefs, your convictions may be that there are no miracles, that no miracles ever happen. What's curious is that if we're in a difficult situation, we almost always hope that there'll be a miracle. But that doesn't mean that miracles happen or don't happen. But we have this knee-jerk reaction or an instinct that we certainly hope that a miracle would happen. So what is a miracle? A miracle is a cessation or a suspension of natural law or natural processes. So something like resurrection from the dead, that would be considered a miraculous event. So somebody who accepts philosophical naturalism would, out of hand, reject the possibility that anyone could be resurrected. And of course, that's a part of a number of belief systems, worldview or religious belief systems. So this position, philosophical naturalism, is related to our metaphysical assumptions, our beliefs, our convictions. People who hold to this view would say there could not be a miracle. The only reason we bring this up here is because it ties back into the three realms of knowing that we talked about. We say that there is a metaphysical realm. We have to have some other way of deciding what is right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. The documentary method just by itself can't tell us that. And the scientific realm can't tell us what is right and wrong. It may suggest that there are things that are better than other things, but it doesn't actually give us a standard for assessing value, good and bad, and those types of things. And so that's usually tied to other assumptions that we have or beliefs or convictions. So philosophical naturalism will actually foul up our actualism, our understanding of actualism, because if actual processes or events could be including something that's supernatural, and again, this is all dependent upon what your worldview, assumptions, beliefs, and convictions are. And we have people in our school community, in our learning community, who hold different positions on this, and we want to respect those various views. But it's quite possible that someone would say, yes, I believe that a particular event, let's say like the Noahic flood in the Bible or the Quran, I believe that that was a real thing that happened, and that's been revealed, divinely revealed in some way. So this is the types of things that we have to understand as we ponder how the scientific realm, the documentary realm, and the metaphysical realm, how they fit together. Remember, we said that the beauty of the three realms of knowing diagram is it can give us a handle or a way of approaching all true knowledge. And I personally believe there has to be a unity of knowledge, that something that's true in one realm can't be competing with something that's true in another realm. They have to agree somehow. And so it could be that we have wrong data. It could be that we have wrong interpretations of our data. But ultimately, everything should fit together. And so that's what we're after, right? Is our school motto, right? We say that we're seeking truth. In fact, here in the corner of my board, here's our Latin logo that says diligent in seeking truth. So we need to constantly be thinking, how do things fit together? So that harkens back to the three realms of knowing. But in our case, these are all views. We have erased stasis, I've erased catastrophism, but stasis, catastrophism, uniformitarianism, and actualism are all views that have been held or are held by people on our planet. And we have to decide what's the best way of approaching things. I will suggest to you that actualism is a nice middle way. It's a way of viewing reality that takes into account slow, gradual processes as well as catastrophic, these sudden, violent processes that we know sometimes are operating on Earth. Everything doesn't happen slowly. Everything doesn't happen gradually, little by little, bit by bit. There are these catastrophic events that sometimes are shaping the geological record, affecting what's being deposited, what's being preserved as far as fossils go. So we'll get a chance to talk more about this in a future class, but these are some of the views that people have held or hold now. Perhaps people in our community hold different views. But again, I think that as a methodological principle, actualism has a lot to win in favor in our thinking. So thanks for listening. Thanks for thinking about how Earth's history has been viewed. And hopefully you found this helpful just as a brief review of some of what we talked about in class today. Thanks. See you next time.